Hello and welcome to the Junkyard Love podcast. Listeners, welcome to the Junkyard Love podcast. Today I'm here with Matt McGee. Hello, Matt. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jacob, how's it going?
It's good, man. I'm happy to make this happen. I actually last minute rescheduled on you, so I do appreciate you working with me on there, man. We're just humans, right? Just humans doing this podcast thing.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, so everybody will see from the title and a little bit of a bio down below. Check that out. But for those who want to know a little bit more in depth, I would love to know kind of your elevator pitch of who you are, what you're doing, what you're here to talk about, what's guiding your life, basically. Who are you, Matt? The hardest
Yeah,
question.
for sure. So I mean, I guess to boil it down to the bare bones, I am an educational consultant. So I work with families who are kind of across the board, whether they're looking for tutoring, whether they're looking to try and get into college, whether they're already in college and they need support sort of developing their course load, figuring out what internships to take. And yeah, so my essential job is to take families who are very anxious about a process in an educational system, which is very difficult to navigate, and I alleviate that anxiety. And that's kind of the view from like 30,000 feet.
Nice. Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Yeah, because I can imagine I mean, for me, I didn't do much college myself, but it's just such a daunting thing. You don't even know where to start. So even just being able to have someone who goes, hey, I got you. Let's work through this together is probably huge for people, I imagine. Huh?
Absolutely. And that's the funny thing, right? So, you say you didn't really go to college. I went to Michigan State, which, for anybody who's in the sort of college search knows that's not really like a competitive school. And I sit here in my industry with a number of other people who are like, I went to Harvard and I have 2 degrees from Harvard, or I went to Yale and then MIT for grad school. Uh, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know that that's what people want to work with. I think they think, well, that's where I want to go, so that's a great thing. But what I've come to realize is that it's it's just a very anxious time for people. They don't know what they're getting into, and they just want somebody who kind of understands the system, understands what people are looking for, and they just want a guide in that way.
Yeah, I mean, makes a ton of sense. I would be in the same boat myself. Well, I mean, so I guess why do you think that it is so anxiety ridden? Like, why is it so stressful? And I guess why is it stressful? We're in 2024 right now. What's different today than it was maybe 10, 20 years ago?
That's a really good question. I don't even think we could probably cover that in the hour that we have today. You need like
Yeah,
a
because by the
PhD.
time this conversation finishes, AI or ChatGPT has released another new version that changes the
Well,
answer.
yeah, exactly. And it's only just gotten more complex through the pandemic, right? I mean, when we were in high school, the formula was pretty simple: get good grades, get a decent score on the SAT, write a personal statement that, isn't terrible. And then you kind of know your range of schools that you can apply to. Um, but it really changed during the pandemic. There were a number of things that happened. One, they sort of went test optional. So anybody who had you didn't have to have an SAT score, right? Normally you'd have to say, I need like a 1500 or a 1550 to even have a shot at Harvard. Then they said, well, you don't need that. And so everyone said, well, maybe I have a shot at Harvard. So their application numbers, and this wasn't just obviously at Harvard, it was across the board.
Right.
You'd see application numbers that were like 12,000 applications, all of a sudden in one year shot up to like 30,000 applications.
Wow.
So it just became a much more competitive process. And I think when you couple that with um, rising prices, where you're looking, when we were doing this process, again, a state school was like $5,000, $10,000. The high end schools were $40,000. Now you're looking at USC and it's $100,000 a year to go there.
Right.
Um, you got the issues with FAFSA and people not knowing how to fill out that form, and so it's becoming more and more complicated. And there's very little explanation as to why. Right? It's a very opaque process. You don't really come across people who work in admissions, right? When was the last time you were at a party and you talked to somebody who was like, oh yeah, I'm a Stanford admissions officer, or I'm an admissions officer at any? You don't meet these people. And so you go like, what is the criteria to get in? What are the standards that you're looking for? And people don't know. And so you have these students who are hyper qualified. You're talking about people who have, a 4.0 GPA in the most difficult classes that you could imagine, with, they're part of this club and they're part of that club and they're leaders and they built their nonprofit organization, and they apply to all these schools and they don't get in, and they're going, why? I don't know why. Um, and I think when you start to add all these questions on top of each other, people just start to go, I have no idea. I
Right.
can't figure it out. And that makes people very anxious, especially when you couple it with the fact that it's a huge part of your life, right? If you go to this school, it's going to open up these opportunities. If you go to that school, it's going to open up those opportunities. If you don't go to school, that's a huge decision. And then you boil in social media to the equation, where you see these people who are going, I did all these things and that's how I got into Harvard, and I did all these things, that's how I got into Stanford. And you have these kids, doom scrolling through Instagram going, I got to get into Harvard, I got to get into Stanford because I want this job, I want that job. And it's like a positive feedback loop of anxiety and stress and destruction and whatnot. And so here I am trying to go, let's take a step back.
Mhm.
let's 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 take some of the stress and the anxiety off this, and figure out how we can best move forward and kind of address the mental health aspect as well as the academic aspect.
Yeah, I feel like you serve a great role of a mediator. Like, let's just relax, calm down. We could figure this out, and then you guide them. So what is you know, that person who does have, they were leaders and they were, the senior class president and they were maybe valedictorian. They've got 4.0. Those people who do think that they have a good chance and then they end up they're not able to get in or whatever. So what is their when they come to you curious about what to get in or how to get in, I mean, what is your answer for that when they have trouble getting in? So you said that all these people, we have more and more applications, and then we have more and more people who are obviously very much qualified. I mean, how are we deciphering between these people who are not qualified and are qualified? How are the big schools even making these decisions nowadays?
That's another great question. It 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 is an extremely opaque process because nobody has insight into it. I mean, it essentially comes down to, I think a lot of people don't know what the admissions process looks like, right? So you're going to submit an application that has all the things on it. And if if I'm your admissions officer, right, you're in the kind of region that I've been assigned to, I'm going to get your application. I'm going to look at it and I'm going to go, I'm going to say one of three things. I'm going to either say, Jacob is great, and I think he'll do great in the next round, and we're definitely going to advance him. There's going to be I think Jacob could meet, the criteria to get in, and I'm gonna advocate for him in the next round. And then there's, Jacob doesn't quite meet the requirements here. We don't think he's going to fit in here, and then we'll move you, and you won't really move on to the next round. And they have a number of scoring systems. Generally, they'll kind of rate you between like a 1 and a 6, for kind of putting you in that criteria. But then after the admissions officer, after I've looked at that and said, hey, I'm going to move you to the next round, now I'm going to sit in a committee with all the admissions officers who did that from the first round. And I'm going to say, I've got Jacob and he is an excellent candidate. Or I've got Jacob and his grades aren't great. His SAT score is really good, but I think he's really great for X, Y, and Z. And I think he'll really, vibe with the campus life. And I think we should really give him a shake. And everybody in the committee is going to have those students of their own, and they're all going to ask each other questions. What is it about Jacob's temperament that you really think is going to fit in with this campus? Jacob said this in his essay, and I'm not entirely sure that that fits with our values. What makes you think that it does, right? And so it's going to become a conversation like that. And I think what people fail to realize is they treat it like they treat it in a more objective way than it is. It's a very subjective process, right? When you think about the kind of like debate that I'm describing, the kind of philosophical discussion that's going on there. Whereas I think people tend to look at it as, I got a 4.0 and I got a 1600, which means that inherently I am a higher qualified candidate than the kid who got a 3.0 and a 1500. And that's not exactly what it is, right? So there's other factors that they're going in there. So you'll have situations in which the kid with the 4 point and the 1600 doesn't get into the number one ranked school, but he gets into the 3 and 4 ranked school. And the kid with the 3.8 GPA and the 1500, he gets into the top school. but he doesn't get into the third and the fourth school. Why? Could be something that they wrote about in their essay that reflected the values. Could be that one of them was doing a project, outside of school and extracurricular that really excited the admissions officer. Could be that they were just trying to fill some sort of a quota and get, somebody from a different part of the country or a different part of the world to fit in there. So there's a million things that go into these decisions, and we don't see those. And so I think for these kids, they're going like, why wasn't I chosen? What's wrong with me? So my philosophy is, look, let's get narrow. Let's be specific about who we are. Who are you? What are you interested in? What do you want to major in? What do you love to do? And go pursue those things. Be proactive, be interesting, be a three-dimensional student. Don't just focus on, academics and test scores, because there's so much to that. And then let's not be committed to Harvard or Stanford or the University of Chicago, because if you are a good enough student, you are that excellent high achiever, we're going to apply to 10, 15, maybe 20 schools. And the ones who are right for you will come find you at that point.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, so we're here in 2024 again. What are the benefits of the more Ivy League schools? I mean, it seems pretty obvious. Like we've all grown up and we know these big names. Everybody knows the obvious, of course, the connections and the education that you get at these places is going to be next level. But here in 2024, what are the benefits of really actually wanting to get into one of these Ivy League schools? And, are the second, third, fourth tier, are they so bad? Are they equally as good too?
I'm biting my tongue as I say this, but I'm going to share this story. I was on a call with an admissions officer and a guy who worked in the finance office at a university that costs between $90,000 and $100,000 a year to go to. Not Ivy League, not Ivy Plus, but kind of in that next level there. And one of the questions that was posed to this guy, or I was posed to both of them, was, your university costs $100,000. There is another university down the street offering the same degree program for $15,000, the state school, essentially. He said, can you pitch me on why your university, what the $85,000 difference is there? And there was about a 5-second pause. And then they said, we're going to decline to answer that question. And it was a very telling response, I thought,
Okay.
insofar as this guy basically said, or I took it to mean, and I think this is a legitimate interpretation. I took it to mean, we can charge that price tag because we have the value. It's like a luxury item, right? Hugo Boss can charge more than, the brand or the non-brand name just because they have the name on there. Is that to say that there's no benefit to going to Harvard or an Ivy League school? No. I mean, you look at I'm gonna fumble the numbers in front of me, but there is a significantly higher percentage of senators, representatives, people in federal government who went to an Ivy League school than those who didn't. Um, and so, what the large or like the top universities are able to offer you in terms of specialization, opportunity, smaller class size in a lot of situations, you are able to get a lot of opportunity there. That being said, whether you go to Harvard or Penn or Duke or Stanford seems to make a little bit less difference in that you're still going to get those opportunities. At the same time, state schools, smaller universities, these are great options for people. You can still get a lot done. A school like Michigan State, it's not well known for its academics, but it's one of the top research institutions in the country. So for the right person, it's a great place to go. And so yes, there is a lot of benefit to that. But the idea of like marrying yourself or trying to get that because, for the status or whatnot, I think people are maybe going in the wrong direction there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It might be evolving. I weirdly kind of like that answer they gave. It's partially gangster a little bit.
The thought I had was the balls
Yeah,
to
dude.
say that, of just, you know what, we charge this because we can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty crazy. Um, okay. but I've got a lot of notes that I want to cover, but something that's kind of just whispering at me that I want to bring up here is we talked on the phone as well. And we talked about like students entering into this world with neurodivergence. We talked about, I mean, you already mentioned mental health and having confidence and all the anxieties that come with this. Um, I guess I kind of want to know, like, I'm not close to that. I'm not close to, as someone you're a mentor, you talk to these people who are coming out of high school, they're around the ages of 17, 18, 19, whatever it is, I imagine. Um, what does that look like? Why is there anxiousness? What's the mental health view of all this? Like, is this another thing that's different than 10 to 20 years ago? Does it look way different? Are you experiencing things that you never thought you would when you first started? I know that's so many questions packed into one, Matt, but if you can
Yeah,
find an
no,
answer.
it's a lot there, but that's good. You know, I'm a straight white guy that grew up in the like 90s and early 2000s. So like mental health is not ever anything that I thought would be on my
Right.
radar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, like I feel like guys like you and me were just like, yeah, we're here. Like,
Yeah.
this is just like I just showed up and like life was pretty good. Um, so mental health, yeah, it never really crossed my mind at all. But I think, since then we've had the advent of social media, like I spoke about, and that's like,
Sure.
I guess we all participate in social media, but I think we're also aware of the kind of like mental health disaster that it creates, uh, especially for young people who are like comparing themselves to each other. And I think one of the reasons why you get this highly competitive admissions process that wasn't so competitive before. Um, but I would say the mental health aspect, I think that's one of the chief aspects that I operate from. And what, if somebody came to me and said, so, there's a million college counselors out there, there's a million tutoring companies out there. What sets you, like, why should I hire you? I would go, well, look, there's a number of people who are going to tell you, I'll get you a 4.0 GPA, or there's a number of people who tell you, I'll get you into an Ivy League school. For me, that's not really my approach. My approach is we're going to maximize your opportunity to get to where you want to go, whether that's talking about like improving your grades, whether that's talking about getting into the best school you can get into. But ultimately, I'm going to do it and I'm going to keep you in a place where you don't hate your life while you do it. So we specifically have a program that is like a tutoring program, and we partner with other college counselors. So students who aren't using me for college counseling, they will come to us for tutoring because you got to keep your grades up, right? And when you think about what you're going through now, for me, applying to college was like, I'm going to look at a couple schools. I'm going to download some applications, write a personal statement. I talked to my history teacher. He wrote me a letter of recommendation. Now these kids are starting nonprofits. They're doing research opportunities during the summer. I had a student who discovered a species of fish. I had another student who started a scrunchie business for her volleyball team when they like went to the state championship. In addition to the fact that they are taking all these APs and they are doing a ton of test prep, right? So like it's a much more significant workload now. So one of the things that our tutoring does is that we specifically hire people who are highly charismatic, highly relatable young individuals who can not only tutor you in calculus or AP bio, but also be somebody who you're not responsible to. Be somebody who a 17, 18-year-old kid can just be like, okay, like, how's it going, man? And they're
Yeah.
like, it's good. Like, you ready to do some calc? Yeah, like let's crush this. Let's get this out of the way. Like, how are you doing? And so to have somebody who can kind of walk both sides of that, where they're not just your teacher, they're not just somebody who's like trying to, be another academic force, but somebody who's just your buddy, somebody who's your boy,
Huge. Yeah.
somebody who can kind of let you breathe. Um, because these kids are like spinning themselves crazy trying to do something that is it's not impossible, but it's very, very difficult. Um,
Yeah, I imagine the pressure to, you see people on TikTok or whatever you're scrolling and you're like, okay, well, this person's 16 and they already have this successful business. And so I need to now dedicate my life to starting my own business so I can get into this school, you know. I'm sure it is very stressful for them to think like I don't have a chance unless I, start my own scrunchie business or discover a new species. Like that's insane. I mean, I imagine those people would have a higher, a higher chance, a higher opportunity because they've done those impressive things, but um yeah, that's pretty cool. I think back to me when I was right after high school. I went to I'm from Washington State originally. There's a community college called Lower Columbia College, and I
Mhm.
went there because I just didn't know. I was like, I don't really have any plans for what I'm doing in my life, and I don't really have anybody to tell me what or not to do or to do. So I just started going there, and man, I remember it would have been so great to have someone like a mentor or a tutor to help be my buddy because I felt so confused, and I felt like everybody who I went to, like they didn't have time to help me. They just had so many other things going on. Uh, just being able to have a conversation with someone who was down to earth, but also not, too shirt and tie. You're 17, 18 years old. You want to connect with someone, so that's probably huge. Do you find that it's very disarming once people meet you? Like you probably, I imagine within the first meeting, you probably relieve a lot of anxiety. Huh?
The amount of the amount of first meetings that I have been on where someone cries,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
the percentage is like disproportionately high. I've even had parents call me. It's funny, like the breadth of my job, because it will go at times where I'm having a very kind of astute conversation about major choice and school choice, and then I'll get a call from a parent who's just like, my kid's got this dog and he's not, he's not taking care of it, and I just don't know what else I can do because he's not doing the work, right? And they're breaking down, so I'm dealing with all that type of stuff. Um, but yeah, it is, and that's one of the rewarding parts about the job is that people, you can almost see them immediately go like,
yeah,
oh, okay, because they come with like a million questions
yeah,
that any lay person would have. Excuse me. And so for me, it's easy to go like, oh yeah, that's a yes, that's a no, that's, X, Y, and Z, that's A, B, and C, and we'll talk about the other question you have. And they go like, oh, that's like 80% of the questions that I had in
yeah.
5 minutes. Um, but
You,
yeah, it's so true. And there's so many students, especially male students, who at 17, 18, right? Like men are behind at 17 and 18. Girls are maturing so much faster than we are. So, guys are looking at like
well,
these
speak
girls
for
who are
yourself
like
here. Speak for yourself. Just kidding. Just kidding.
um, they're looking at these girls going like, yeah, like you said, they're founding two companies and they're volunteering, and I'm over here like trying to beat the next level on Call of Duty, and I can't do that.
Yeah.
Uh, and so it like, yeah, it creates this like trying to catch up, and just to have somebody say like, yeah, this is normal, this is where you should be. Somebody to say that community college is a totally acceptable, if not highly intelligent decision to make if you don't necessarily know where you're going to go. I know college counselors who will push people to four-year universities because they're able to charge money for the hourly that goes into that application, where I'm like, if you don't know what you want to do, go to a 2-year university. You're going to save 50 grand a year, and you're probably going to come out more mature, and in the end give yourself a better shot at a better college, and ultimately a better career, a better understanding of yourself. You'll have the time to figure it out because you won't be in this cutthroat environment where you're comparing yourself to everybody else.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. How much would you say the journey into just entering the world of college? We turn 18 and we've just done the whole thing for 12 years. We followed the carrot on the stick and now it's time to go out into the big world. I mean, what level of this is I mean, what do I want to say? So like when we're ready for, I mean, how much are you helping people like start their own hero's journey into themselves? Like not even just college. I feel like you probably show up as some sort of. It sounds like you're basically a counselor in a lot of ways too, right? Like a maybe not necessarily therapist, but like friend extended for sure. These people are starting their life. It's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and like I said, there is a reason why in the tutoring program, we specifically aim for like young, charismatic people who know the journey that these kids are going under, because it is like highly relatable. And
Yeah.
there is science to prove, right? You will talk to teachers that like the learning process accelerates dramatically when the student feels comfortable with the person who is offering that information. So I might have like some old, like you said, suit and tie teacher who's teaching me calc or whatever it is. And I'm going like, I'm not getting any of this. I don't feel free to fail. I don't feel free to ask questions. But then you put me in the room with the like 25-year-old who gets it, who is cool, who's relating to me, who's like telling, and then all of a sudden I have the freedom to fail. I have the freedom to ask these questions. I have the freedom to look stupid because I'm building a relationship. So many of my students, because I'm a relatively young guy that I work with, they're students who I'll start with them when they're 16, but when I'm done with them, they're 22, 23 years old. And we've gone from, our relationship evolves in that time from, I'm more of a teacher at 16, but by the time they're in college, it's much more of a
Friendship.
situation, it's much more of a friendship, right? And they're telling me things about like what they did last night that they're not telling their parents. And I'm like, yeah, like that's normal. That's to be expected. That's where things should be. But yeah, there is a degree of therapy. Like I said, how many people are crying on some of these initial calls? Is that ultimately, yeah, these people are dealing with, like I said earlier, they're dealing with anxiety and they just want that relieved. They want somebody who can guide them and lead them and let them know it's going to be okay, because it's a big time. It's a big transition. You're still a teenager, so your hormones are still raging, like all that's happening. And like you said, people are too busy to help a lot of the time, or they're kind of like, Um, and so it comes back to just wanting to give them that moment where they can take a breath for a second, they can relax, they can know that they're taken care of.
Right. Yeah, that's huge, man. Just being able to hold space for someone to just, blot out that they don't really know exactly what they're doing, but they need help, that's pretty huge. Man, so I want to ask you, say I am raising, I've got a kid and, they're in their teens and they're approaching high school. Maybe they're turning 15, 16, somewhere around there. And, they're starting to think about college. We're starting to talk about college. They don't really know where they want to go. Maybe they have some certain interests that we want to buckle down on. And I need to know, what do they need to start doing? If I was their parent and I reached out to you guys, what does that look like? Even just one little foot in the door of, hey, we don't know much about college. We don't have any decisions made yet, but we need your help. What does that conversation usually look like?
Yeah, for sure. So it can look like a number of things depending on how many questions they already have answered. So, some people come and they're like, my kid loves math, and he's really into robots, and he's already doing this robot competition, and he's in BattleBots 2024. And that, then I kind of go like, great, we have a huge part of what we need, and let's run with that. But to kind of answer that question from what I'll say, I mean, for lack of a better term, the lowest common denominator, not in quality, but in terms of having the least amount of questions answered. Um, that starts with, what are we interested in? What has your child been interested in? It's a question about, where's your ability to pay for college? What is the kind of schedule like? All of these questions. And then we start to get into uh, it all comes down to, what is this kid interested in? What are they passionate about? Do they have those things? Because once we've started to build their interests, their passions, what they care about, then we can really start to kind of like move forward in a healthy way. If you're interested in politics, right? Then having, making sure that we're taking AP US history, making sure that we're taking honors history and honors English class, making sure that we're getting into writing classes, that's going to be important. And it's also going to be something that the student enjoys, right? If you come to me and you're like, I love politics and government, I'm not going to tell you, well, you have to take AP calculus. That might ultimately be where you go if you want to be a really high achieving student, but it's going to be about kind of like pushing into your interests and making sure that you're taken care of there. From there, we'll start to talk about, all right, so what do they do in the summers? Are they going away to camp? Are they big into sports? What's going on there? So how can we now take this interest, let's say government and politics, and how can we start to build a list of extracurricular or, like uh, activities to create create what's eventually going to look like on your resume as a degree of proactivity and a degree of intellectual curiosity, right? So if you're seeking out an internship with a local city councilman, or you're constantly submitting op-eds to the local paper about some local election, right? And you start to take those interests and you turn them into very specific accomplishments that not everybody has, right? If you just take a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old, they're going to say, I'm interested in politics. I read the news. I do what I have to do in class. Maybe I pick up a book and I read it, but they're not going to have the direction and the follow through to kind of go and say, how can I get published? Right. And so that's where my job is, to kind of go and say, how can I sort of channel your talents? How can I challenge your interests and your passions into these more concrete, achievable, and measurable things that would look really good on a resume?
Yeah, excellent, amazing. Okay, um, man. I want to ask you one more time. So when we first talked, neurodivergence was a thing that was specifically mentioned. I would love
Sure.
to, I'm not sure that I can form a specific question around that, but I would love to just loudly kind of note it and put a question mark next to it. And I guess just kind of ask you to expand on that for me. Like what, I guess, kind of what does that mean, and what does it mean for, our modern young people growing up, and how does it affect, what you do in our thoughts about education?
Sure. I love that. Just neurodivergent with a question mark next to it.
Please. Yeah.
Go. Um, so neurodivergent, I mean, is a term that sort of broadly encompasses, and I'm likely to put my foot in my mouth here, so I apologize to anybody if this is not the exact phrasing that it uh, is to say that someone whose brain processes information differently than what we would consider the typical way of processing information. That gets to be pretty muddy, because you go like, what is the typical way of processing information? We all do it differently. Like, that's what personality is. But I guess, to put it in a more digestible bit, you would consider somebody who is autistic to be neurodivergent. You would also consider somebody who has ADHD to be neurodivergent. Dyslexia counts as a neurodivergence. Um, People with physical disabilities, I don't believe, are always neurodivergent, but somebody with Down syndrome would be neurodivergent. So it's kind of a nebulous thing there. Um, and we've seen an increase with it over the past decade, I'll say. And I think that's probably a combination of one, more exposure and more awareness surrounding it. And then two, the decrease of attention spans related, going back to social media and technology and the way that, we do that. Um, just to kind of talk about how I work with it, uh, it it is a very underserved space. In fact, when I was just getting started, I was working as a private tutor with no training in special education or neurodivergence or anything like that. And I was working for a very bougie company that was charging a lot of money for tutoring. And they sent me two kids. And I said, okay, great. Yeah, that sounds great. And they said, cool, we'll get you started. And then when I had the conversations with the parents, the one parent was like, yeah, so we started this homeschool because my child is autistic. And I spoke to the next one, and they were like, yeah, so we had to pull my child out of school because she has such severe anxiety that she often cannot speak or will not speak.
Oh, wow,
And I
poor
was
thing.
like, yeah. And I was also like, well, I'm not qualified to
Yeah, what do I do about that?
like,
Yeah.
why would you give me these things? But ultimately I kind of came to the conclusion that if they gave them to me, it was because they felt I was the best person for these. There wasn't though as though there was some special educator out there who they were like,
Right.
no, let's not give it to him. So I took on the cases.
You paused on my end, Matt. I'm not sure if you can hear me. I'm not sure if it was your end or mine. Well, that's fine. Hey, we're back on. It looks like it's working good. I think we can carry on. So, Matt, we were in the middle of neurodivergency. So you had someone, you had two people that came up. One had extreme anxiety. Someone had, what was it, autism that they had, or?
Yes, one student was autistic, the other student was not, but she had, like I said, extreme anxiety to the point where she couldn't speak.
Sure.
Um, And through the process, I just realized how underserved these people were, that here they were shelling out all this money, expecting this like special educator, and they got me, who, I was down to figure it out and take the time. But like I said, I was successful in one case. I wasn't as successful in the other case. And that kind of led me down the road of, so what do these students do after they finish up, after they finish high school? Um, and ultimately I realized that a lot of these families, they think that college is not an option. They think that it's not possible, or that, it's not feasible for them. Uh, and so I thought that's crazy, because given what we do, given what I'm talking about with trying to find the passions and the interests in schools, wanting to build a diverse student body, a lot of these students in both of these cases, I had, the autistic student who I was talking about was hyper interested in politics and economics, and the other student was hyper interested in art, right? To the point where they had an understanding of this at 15, 16. The girl was like 11 or 12, uh, that I don't think I would be able to have insight into in years of practice.
Hmm.
Um, and so I started to kind of say, like, well, why is this? I mean, we could take these people. They could go to a top college. And I work with students who have ADHD, who are at, UC Berkeley or other top universities, and you go, there is a program for students who have disabilities, or students who have a neurodivergence, and to be supported. And so that's just kind of one of the things that I have sort of built, is trying to work with these students who have different circumstances to help, make sure that they can have the education that they can have, but that they don't always feel that they don't always know that they can have it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that must be huge to even be able to offer them and tell them, like, yeah, you totally have a chance. Like, it's just probably sometimes a huge sigh of relief on their end and their parents' end to even see, like you said, that it is an option, because I think that especially young people, when we're different, when we, we can tell we don't think or act or, exist the same way as quote unquote everybody else. It could kind of, make us seem like our future is already written in a sort of way. But, actually, as it turns out, I like the, I don't know if you ever heard, I think it was Alan Watts said, if you judge a fish by his ability to climb a tree, he will live his entire life thinking that he is stupid, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's so cool. I imagine you probably find those people like, cool, what are your skills? Cool, this college or this opportunity is perfect for those skills.
That's exactly what it is. And so often they do have these heightened skills, where they're like, a lot of times they latch onto an idea that they love, and they have the attention span and the inclination to explore that way further than, somebody who is quote unquote neurotypical, if you will. Um, and the other piece of that too is that a lot of them go like, well, I have this thing that I've always been ashamed of, because again, you're 16, 17, 18, so you haven't yet come to that place of celebrating your differences.
Sure.
And so, it's also coaching to be like, no, you have this thing that sets you apart. And I know you don't see it now, because that's not the way that kids are, but this is going to be a huge thing, that it's going to be something that you can celebrate. It's going to be something that makes you stand out. It's going to make, it's going to be um, a distinctifier, which is going to be beneficial in the long run. And getting them to kind of celebrate that in their applications, so that they can again stand out, because when you're competing against like 30,000 people, you need to stand out in some sort of way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Okay. Well, so what is let's cue in a little bit more on what you just said. Standing out. Everybody has their individual characteristics. Everybody has their thing that if they, I'm sure you help bring it out of them. How important is it for people looking into colleges to stand out? And what does it mean to stand out?
if you're looking at a top university, like if you're looking at like the top of the top, it is it is not only important, it's completely vital to stand out. I would also say that if you're applying to the kind of like that second level of university and you really want to get to that level, again, it's very important to stand out. If you're looking and you're going, I want to go to a large state school that maybe isn't that competitive, my scores are pretty good, but I'm going because I want to be part of a big student body, or I want to be I want to be in a successful sports program, whatever it is. You probably don't need to stand out as much. Your, test scores and your grades will kind of take care of that for you. But standing out comes in a number of ways. Uh, Standing out sort of is college applications are ultimately a story, right? You're telling a story, and a lot of times I operate as like a PR guy, where I'm like,
Mm.
this is who Jacob is, right? And we put it to him that way. But standing out can have, a number of ways of looking at it. In that, like, the girl, to take the example of the girl with the scrunchies, right? She built that business. Uh, the volleyball team, the girls' volleyball team was going to be really good. Everybody knew they were going to be really good. So she says, okay, I have this great idea. I'm going to create these scrunchies, right? The like things that girls tie their hair up with. She goes, I'm going to get these scrunchies. We're going to have like individualized scrunchies for each one of the girls on the team. And then we're going to sell them to the town, and you can buy your favorite player scrunchies, right? Because the town is
So
super
brilliant.
excited, right? And she's this smart, young, affable, outgoing girl. She's got this great idea, and she starts to get, because it's like, it's like a couple $1,000. It's not like crazy investment, but it's a couple $1,000 to get these things like screen printed and whatnot. So she has this great idea. She gets some investment from the people in the town, and she has this, it's going to be great. It's going to blow up, and it flops. Like, no one buys these scrunchies. Basically, the girls on the team and their families bought them, but
It
nobody bought them.
seemed like a great idea.
It did. It sounds like a great idea, right? And everyone was excited. It fails. And so then this is to this day, I use this example. Anybody who hears me on other podcasts has probably heard this example, is that she opens up her essay. And mind you, this girl is going into business. She wants to be a business major. She opens up her essay with, the first time I declared bankruptcy, I was 16 years old.
Wow.
And you go, that makes you stand out because, one, it's funny. And two, it's the embracing of failure, right?
Yeah.
To go, I failed epically, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to hide it. I'm not
Yeah.
going to
I
say, like,
tried something.
I tried, I failed, and you know what? I'm back up, and I'm going to move on to the next thing. Um, So that's one way you can stand out, right? The other way is, I'll go back to the example of the kid who discovered the species of fish. How many other people can say that they have done that? Um, and so again, he was hyper interested in wildlife. So he spent a lot of his time in parks. And when he did find those fish, I was the one who encouraged him, hey, let's get in touch with the local biologists to kind of like do some research around this and take it a little further. Um, we had another student who wanted to go to MIT. The kid did not really have the grades for MIT, but and this was like 10 years ago, maybe, he had developed a primitive AI system that helped with organization, somehow, like organizing data, basically.
Hmm.
And he had implemented it at his school library so that kids were able to kind of like search for the book that they wanted to, but they could also search for other books that would be useful to them based on their search query.
Huh.
And we took that and we went to his local library and we had them implement it, right? So you see that on an application, and all of a sudden the admissions officer leans forward and goes like, oh, this person's thinking outside the box. He got into MIT, right? And so it's that type of stuff where you really need to, in order to stand out, you need to take your interests and pursue them to the point where the opportunity shows up, right? It's kind of where like luck meets hard work. And then, when that moment happens, we've got to talk about it. Um, because that's how you stand out. Because I can tell you what, there's 20,000 high schools in the US, which means there's 20,000 valedictorians, and they all have 4.0 GPAs and great test scores. And I can tell you that there's less than 20,000 spots at all of the Ivy League schools total.
Yeah.
So you got to, in some way, stand out, show your proactivity, show your intellectual curiosity, show that you're not afraid of failure, and show that you're a person who does more than grades and school and piano lessons.
Right. Right. Yeah. I'll bet that you end up, meeting with people and helping them helping pull that part out of them, you know, because I imagine more people than they think have something that's pretty impressive or something that they know quite a bit about that they think is just like, well, yeah, whatever. Of course I know all about this fish. I like fish. And you're like, dude, not everybody knows about fish. Like you actually have something here, you know?
That's exactly right. I mean, even with the example of the fish, he was talking about terms. There's like, a type of fish that swims to the ocean and a type of fish that doesn't swim to the ocean. And he's going like, yeah, they're these like diandromedas fish that they go to the ocean, and these other ones, they don't do that. So they must be another species. And I'm going like, I don't know what you're saying, but
Yeah.
like, this is all really good stuff. Like we got to use this. Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, that's exactly what it is. And trying to pull that out of you, because when you're 17, you don't always necessarily know where you want to go. And I think, what the question was when I had a guidance counselor, they were sort of like, so what would you do if you didn't have to worry about money, right?
Yeah.
And then like if you said, yeah, I would just like, hang out with my car and work on my car, then you were supposed to be a mechanic. And if you were, if you said I wanted to, write in my journal, then you were supposed to go be a writer. But to me, that's like that's a question for one person working with like 150 people. But to really
Yeah.
get to know someone and allow them to open up to you is a whole different ball game.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I love all those examples. I feel like that really, for me personally, that makes me realize how important you guys are as mentors and tutors, and in the role that you serve, being able to help people kind of figure it out. I mean, just something that my mind keeps wanting to compare it to. I've been updating my resume recently, and it's one of those things where it's, like I have accomplished a lot of things, but I don't really know if they're important to mention or not. And then I'll see, I'm looking at applications or looking at, different gigs or whatever it is, and LinkedIn will suggest certain key terms or keywords or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I have all those. I didn't realize it was important to mention on my resume, but if that'll help me be seen, like, cool, I'll throw it on there. It's completely true. I have that skill. I just didn't know to include it. So yeah, I mean, it's got to be so useful for people to meet y'all and realize that they, have a lot of spinning plates, and they could just kind of consolidate them into, a narrative to present like, here's who I am and here's why it's important to take a look at me.
Well, and that goes back. It's so interesting that you say that about the resume and like, having things that you didn't necessarily know were useful, because that goes back with the opaque process, the opacity of the process, which is sure, I have all these things. I know what I do, I know what I like, but what do I include? Right. And so, like I said, our job is to kind of be the PR person to tell the story, because ultimately they don't necessarily care about every little thing that you did. They don't care about your 1 year on JV lacrosse. If they're interviewing you or thinking about you from the perspective of, are we going to let them into our exclusive bioengineering major? They want to know about the things that you did there. Maybe they want to know about a few other things so they can gauge your proactivity and your work ethic. But ultimately it's those type of things. But in terms of figuring out what should I put on there and what shouldn't I put on there, whether it's a job search or a college application or a high school application, whatever it is, it's important to have people know that. And I feel like you don't necessarily know what the person on the other side of the table wants from
Yeah,
you,
I wouldn't have any idea, and now, and especially back then, but now I still don't. I'm 33 years old almost. I have no idea. So
Yeah, right. It's and it's possible that it's just like AI, right? Going, Jacob had, writer 4 times on his bio, interviewer 2 times, right? So yeah, we can see
yeah,
him or we can't see him because of that. You go,
yeah.
what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, well, so from what you've seen, how much? I mean, you mentioned AI. I briefly brought it up earlier. I do kind of want to. That might be another one that I put a question mark next to for you. How has it changed their process? I think you've already helped me realize that it's, like a room full of people who are, real actual people who are reading these things and having conversations about who to let in and whatnot. I'm not even sure if I fully comprehended that, but how nowadays, comprehended that until now, until you explained it. But nowadays, the technology keeps on moving and grooving, doesn't it? Chat GPT still keeps improving. I'm sure that's not only changing education and changing high school, college, and everything, but how is our advancements in technology specifically changing college admissions, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you on the screening of application side, it's not, or at least it hasn't yet. If you submit an application, that is being reviewed by an actual human person.
Hmm.
They're not going to say, we had our AI read your essay and, welcome to the school, or you can't
Yeah,
come here.
you forgot 4 commas and we detected it.
Yeah, exactly. That's not going to happen. There are initiatives within the schools. It's a competing process, right? Because in a lot of ways they go like, we kind of want to squash AI because it's an opportunity or a vehicle potentially for cheating. But then now you're having a movement of graduates saying we aren't prepared for the workplace because we weren't trained in AI. We weren't taught anything about AI. So there's sort of a competing thing of, let's get more classes in AI, let's get more training and understanding in AI because it's not going anywhere. And also controlling it because it does allow for people to cheat. Um, as far as my perspective with it, I have nothing against AI. I think AI is a useful tool. If you use it properly. I have had, I'll say 2 or 3 situations in which I am working with a student on an essay, whether that's a college essay or, an essay for class. And I'm going, okay, so here are some of the edits you need to make, right? Maybe we need to sharpen up this paragraph. I really like what you said here, but, we've got to kind of like put these things together and we'll sign off. That'll be the end of the session. And then they'll send me the work. And, I'm seeing something that's like, I really want to go to the University of Arizona because the University of Arizona is a great school in the Southwest, right? And you're seeing this whole thing, and I'm going, and I don't want to accuse anybody. So I kind of
Right.
go, I think that these edits are maybe a little bit too basic for you. I think we could clean it up. I think we could get more of you into this. If I'm being perfectly honest, reads a little bit like AI wrote this.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
maybe let's get more specific with it, right? So I can kind of throw that like backhand, like, I think you may have done AI
Right.
here,
Yeah, I see ya.
without openly accusing somebody. Um, but it is an interesting thing because it's not going anywhere, right? And it's only going to get better and better and better. Um, but I think colleges are kind of famously behind the curve on a lot of things just because they're large institutions that are kind of steeped in process and
Tradition.
tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the top universities, you're talking about going back to the 17th century. These are not these are not organizations that move quickly with policy or make decisions expeditiously, I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's really cool to think it's changing so quick, and for us to see how it's useful and not of benefit to us to use these tools, because that's what they are. It's not going to solve all of our problems, but as we learn more and more about it, people spend more and more time with it. We can be more of a cyborg with our with our tools that are changing, and as Chat GPT evolves. Matt, I wanted to ask you. I wanted to back up a little bit, man. I would love to know on the personal side of things. I was listening to you on another podcast. I think that you said, is it true that you were a professional hockey player? Is that correct?
No, I was never a professional hockey player.
No.
Uh,
Okay, you played hockey.
I played hockey for most of my life. I was a very high level hockey player, but ultimately being a professional wasn't in the cards for me. Um,
Okay.
and it
Okay.
goes back to the question, when my guidance counselor asked me, like, what would you do if you didn't have to, if you didn't have to worry about money? I think my answer was probably like, yeah, I'll play hockey. And then,
And
and
she's
then
like,
you go like,
you play hockey. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I'll play hockey. And then you go like, well, great. What happens if you're not good enough? And you go like, well, I don't know. I'm 17. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah. 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 Terrifying. Okay. Yeah. Well. Okay. So, rewinding time back to when you were 17 playing hockey, and you were getting to the self, I guess I would just like to know what was your journey into being, your life as a teen, you playing hockey, into being a mentor, a tutor, and then I mean now you guys have this organization, this you know, these other people that you work with. You're the founder. Is it MRM Education? That's you guys, MRM
Yeah.
Education and Elite
Yeah.
Tutoring.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, you founded this, and you've gathered these people who have these other skills, and now you're helping all these people, all these younger people. How did you get to there? I mean, what's the jump from you as you're young? You started mentoring and tutoring at what age, and then how did it kind of lead into what it is now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I was that 17-year-old who was like, I don't necessarily know what I want to do. I knew I liked certain things, but ultimately, like I said, my whole life was like, I'm gonna go play hockey. Right. And then there's a reality check of like, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I got into writing, um, politics, government, loved all that type of stuff. And ultimately, the first opportunity that presented itself when I got out of college was to work with, one-on-one with students. So I was working as an ESL teacher, I was working as a private tutor. And so that kind of led me down this path. Ultimately, the reason that I got into like starting my own company was I realized a trend that exists within both college prep, tutoring, SAT prep, all of that stuff, in that tutoring can be a very expensive service. There are tutors that charge, $250, $300 an hour, companies that charge that. And the belief is, at least on the parent side, that, well, I'm paying $200 an hour for my tutor, they must be excellent. Um, and the reality is they might be excellent because those tutoring companies are still only paying their tutors $25, $35 an hour. So ultimately, what you get is a lot of, like myself, 22, 23-year-olds who are out of college. So maybe I'm good. Maybe I'm not good, right? You get a lot of people who are in grad school working to become a doctor or a lawyer. You get a lot of people who are scratching out a living as a creator, an artist, or a writer, and they're using what they learned in college to kind of teach these people. Um, and I thought, this is crazy that these families are paying $200, $250 an hour, and they're getting a tutor that can't really be that flexible with their schedule because they're doing something else, or a tutor that is eventually going to be like, this was fun, but like, I'm going to go be a doctor now.
Right.
Um, and ultimately a tutor that is a part-time person, right? And so I thought this is crazy. We can't do this anymore. So I started my company with the understanding that we would professionalize the process. We were going to pay a significantly higher wage. We start our tutors at $80 an hour now. And the idea being that they won't need to pack their schedule with 8 students a day to make ends meet. They will be incentivized to be able to reschedule sessions, to be able to be flexible with their scheduling. And that ultimately I would be able to weed out people who weren't quite so good. Um, so now I'm able to kind of solve for like what I was saying before with the like highly charismatic people. I'm able to get people who are younger. I'm able to get people who are interesting and relatable to talk to, which is actually probably the most difficult thing for hiring. I'm able to hire people who have AP reader experience, which for those people who aren't familiar with what that is, they are the graders of the AP test.
Hmm.
So, you're talking about like high level educators. We have college professors. We have high school department chairs. And ultimately, that was kind of the idea, is to say, if you're going to shell out all this money for tutoring, you really ought to be getting the service that you deserve to get. And if you're a tutor and you have all these expertise and qualifications, then you ought to be getting the wage that you deserve to get. Otherwise, we're going to constantly be in this system where people are frustrated with the service and they don't know why, because sometimes they can get a good tutor, but other times they can't get a good tutor. And they're like, why is this working sometimes, but not other times? And you're realizing it's just kind of like a luck of the draw situation.
Right. 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 Yeah. 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 I get that. Okay. Yeah. That's good. Okay. And then so how did you start rounding up people who know? I mean, I assume there's other people that work for you. I mean, how did you stumble across these people? I'm sure they've got pretty good resumes themselves.
Yeah. Well, you know what it was? It was really easy when I put $80 an hour on the
Yeah.
job posting. Um, and I started to get people who I was interviewing. I interviewed one woman who was She was the mathematics department chair at Southern New Hampshire University. And she's talking about how she was a biostatistician by trade. And I'm interviewing this woman thinking, like, you are more qualified to be
Yeah.
hired me than I am to be
Talk about
hired.
imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Seriously, right? And I'm going like, what am I interviewing you for? But you meet a lot of people like that, right? And I think ultimately when it comes to being like a business owner and trying to be a responsible business owner is that like people want a couple of things. One, they want to feel like they're being compensated properly for their expertise and their time. And two, they want to feel like they're part of something. And I think that's what we create when we say like we're really trying to deliver that service. So my process looks like, putting a job post out there, whether it's on LinkedIn or kind of word of mouth, uh, and then meeting people. Because if you can be relatable and you can be interesting and you can be enjoyable, then I have something for you. Whereas I don't care how many degrees you have or what your expertise is. If you aren't interesting and enjoyable to talk to, if I can't connect with you, if someone
Mm-hmm.
can't connect with you, then ultimately they're just going to continue to struggle with whatever they were struggling with before they came to you, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's more than just what's on the paper, like you don't just, all right, I have these accomplishments now. I just sit here and everything good happens.
Sure, it'd be like having a podcast guest who knew everything about, I don't know, but they, were unable to speak or have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, they can be brilliant, but I mean, yeah, I mean, charisma goes a long way, and something I learned, about myself and other people is, certain areas I can be charismatic, certain subjects I can be incredibly charismatic. There's things that I am so passionate about that other people might not care about at all, but get me talking about those things, and I'm going to come across incredibly charismatic and interesting, and I might get you to be interested in those things because I'm so pumped about them. And so,
That's
yeah, just
exactly.
finding exactly where people fit and giving them a little bit of space to, dance around, I suppose.
I love that. I might be able to get you interested in something you didn't care about. Like, describe to me the teaching tutoring process in one sentence. I might be able to get you to care about something you didn't care about before. Like, that's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Super cool, man. Well, yeah, okay. So how long have you guys been in business? How long has your company been around?
We've been around basically from the pandemic. We're fully virtual.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my opportunity to say, hey, like I can do this now, right? I don't need like a brick and mortar location. So yeah, we've
Yeah.
been around since mid 2020.
Okay, and within those years, I mean, what is this a trick question, I suppose, but what have you learned? What has it taught you about yourself? I mean, I'm sure it's a lot of self development by being an entrepreneur, starting a company, learning all these things. What have you learned about you, or I guess just about the whole thing in general?
Business is hard. Business is hard. I got into this and I was an educator and I knew going in that I didn't know all these things about business. And so that was going to be difficult. Um, but the grind of being an entrepreneur day in, day out, managing people, doing the same things over again. I mean, we were talking a little bit about what we do in the summer for, an education company where we have, less clients. Um, and just kind of like keeping yourself disciplined and staying on top of the things when you don't have a boss breathing down your neck. It's wonderful in a lot of ways because you do have that freedom, but then if you have the freedom to prosper, you also have the freedom to fail.
Mm-hmm.
um, but I think the one thing that I would say, if I had to say I took something away, is that like if you can be connected to the why, it really changes the game, because then you do want to stay that. It's like every time I bring a new tutor in, or I make a connection with a partner, we partner with a company, or I go to a fundraiser, I see all these people and I'm like, I want to get that tutor. I want to get that tutor work. I want to do that. I go to the fundraiser and I go like, I want to help these moms who are, worried about their kids with disabilities. You said, I want to offer value to that partner, and being able to connect to that why. I think that's the key. If you're mission driven, if you have a purpose as to why you're doing it, it all becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. Oh, wow, what a beautiful answer. I love that, man. Yeah, it's cool. I feel like it's everybody always talks about service. If you can like just pick something that's bigger than you, and so we don't have to think. It's so easy to think about ourselves all the time, right? So if you can have something where you can be in a room and go, that person was interesting. I think I could actually help them. and then be able to have the tools and resources to do so. I mean, how cool is that? Like what? Yeah. Yeah. I always quote this. I always find a way to jam it in there. But Ram Dass, he's a spiritual teacher. He always says, we're all just walking each other home, And I just feel like what that means to me a lot of times is, I might have something that is useful for somebody else to like express themselves and walk them towards their home as I'm walking towards mine. We're all on the same path, so to say. Well, cool, man. We are getting up here in time. I want to make sure that we covered everything that's important for you. I mean, I want to make sure everybody knows. I'll include everything in the description down below. Everybody will have those links. Is there anything else that people need to know about MRM Education, Elite Tutoring? Anything?
No, I think we covered everything and more.
Brilliant. Well, I love it, man. I'm hoping some people reach out to you from this, and it was really nice talking to you. It was really cool to get some of your perspective on this. So I really appreciate you reaching out. And then, one more time, again, it's really grateful that you were willing to reschedule. I know I did cancel on you last minute, and that's not the most professional business move there, but I really appreciate that, man.
Happens to the best of us. This was a pleasure. Not all podcasts are great and like enjoyable to be on. So like, thank you for having me, and thanks for like making this cool conversation. This was fun.
Yeah. Wonderful, man. All right. Well, we'll be in touch, man. I'll send you a text. I'll get edited all this. Listeners, love yourself. If you haven't drank any water today, what are you doing, dude? Drink some water, stretch, move around, and then check out the links below and check out Matt's stuff. If you have any questions, I'm sure you could probably send over an email, and he seems like he'd be pretty happy to answer for you. So everybody, have a good rest of your day. Matt, you as well. I'll be in touch. Thanks again, man.
Thanks, Jacob.
Cheers.
All right. See you, man.
Hello and welcome to the Junkyard Love Podcast.
With ourselves.
Knowledge is power.